This week we're talking about self-regulation, which I always like to say are the keys to the educational and life success kingdom, truly. Self-regulation is at the heart of it an ability to resist an impulse. So you know that for some kids that's very difficult, for some adults that's very difficult. But sometimes when we think about what kinds of impulses are we resisting, we think too narrowly. It's not just hollering out in class. It's not just crying at the drop of a hat. It is behavioral, emotional, and cognitive impulses that we have to resist. And self-regulation is something that we are not born with, although we have the tiniest bit of it at infancy. What we refer to as self-soothing is the degree to which self-regulation is present at infancy. It's most of all something that develops through adolescence and into adulthood. And it relies on the executive function, which you remember, that's the part of your brain that sits towards the front, the prefrontal cortex, where your central executive resides and directs your brain to do things that require control, problem solving, manipulation, creativity, all of those things. Executive function lives in the same space as problem solving, innovation, and creativity. And it requires, this is an important piece, it requires the ability for you to recognize multiple options. And prior to a certain age, you don't have so much of an ability to imagine that you could behave this way or that way, or people could have behaved this way or that way. Before you have that ability to compare to imagine and then compare multiple outcomes, it's very difficult to show much in the way of self-regulation. Although we see self-regulation present in kids as early as 2 and 3 and 4. And in fact, the more self-regulation someone has at the ages of 2 or 3 or 4, the more likely they are to have high quality self-regulation later in life. So examples of self-regulation are delaying gratification, managing your emotions, suppressing your crying and hitting, working amidst distractions, focusing attention here, not there, following rules, monitoring voices, and standing still. So a lot of the things that we expect kids to do in schools, it's worth knowing that that's something that they're developing, that it doesn't mean much if someone doesn't have it yet, that the purpose of to a certain extent, the purpose of the rules in schools is to help kids to develop self-regulation. So kindness over strict discipline is usually useful, especially in the earlier ages. Now, I want you to pause the video and watch this marshmallow test video, because this is, if you remember a minute ago, I said that self-regulation is something that that if you have more of it at 2, 3, and 4, that you have that you have better success outcomes, that you have more self-regulation later in life and have greater success outcomes. This marshmallow test is a reenactment of a test that was done more than 50 years ago with kids who were at the time 2, 3, and 4. Actually, they were 4, and they were given the opportunity to either have 1 marshmallow now or 2 marshmallows in a couple minutes. So watch this video and then come back to me in just a second. So pause the video and go watch the video on YouTube. So that video is ridiculously cute, and if you didn't watch it, you really need to go watch it. So kids who were successful at the marshmallow test, were successful at waiting for 4 minutes to have 2 marshmallows, had really incredible outcomes, life outcomes. They were described by their parents as more competent in their teens, better achievement, healthier friendships, better prefrontal cortices, which makes sense since we know executive function exists in the prefrontal cortex, higher lifetime wealth, lower rates of criminal offending. So these outcomes are really pretty powerful. That's why we say that self-regulation are the keys to the kingdom. So what I want you to do, what I want you to do is just answer this question: what is self-regulation and why does it matter to educators? Please spend a little time with this question, because it's what we would be doing in class, is really talking together and pondering and figuring out, why is it that self-regulation matters so much? What is it exactly? What are the components of it? Remember, self-regulation is not just regulating your behaviors. It's regulating your cognitive, emotional, and behavioral impulses. Why does it matter? And make sure you bring the marshmallow test into the answer of that question. So you will see in the classroom stream that there's just two of these. There's two sets of questions, this one about self-regulation and a few about the growth mindset. So take your time to answer this question, drop it into a regular Word document, and upload it to the assignment in the stream. So moving on to the second half, beliefs about intelligence. So I want you to imagine that you gave a quiz in your math class and you spent tons and tons of time providing feedback to your students on their work. And you offered all of these helpful suggestions for improvement. But when you handed back the papers, you got a couple of different responses. So some students might take the paper and glance at the grade and shove it into their backpack. Other students might just put their head down, refuse to look to the paper at all. But when you try to discuss your feedback, she says, "Miss, I'm just not a math person." So why is this happening in this classroom? This is the big question. Well, as educators, we have a lot of opinions, right? We have a lot of theories about why our students are behaving the way that they are. And you may think that the students are just tired, and that is not an unreasonable assumption, because a lot of kids don't have as much stability as they could, as much routines as they could, and they may very well be tired at school. They may be having family or friend trouble. They haven't eaten, although hopefully in New York City public schools they have, because there's free breakfast for all. Or what you may not be considering is that when they hear or see that feedback, they interpret it not as helpful feedback, but as proof that they are in fact failures. So why would somebody think of helpful feedback as failure? Because as teachers, we think of it as the guideposts, fueling a lifetime love of learning. But the students might see feedback as proof that they're stupid or a major threat to their identity as a smart kid. In either case, the feedback basically feels like this, right? You're just walking down the road of life, minding your own business, suddenly get hit in the head with a basketball, right? It comes out of nowhere. It feels very uncomfortable. And suddenly, like, they weren't questioning their basic self-worth until you came along with your red pen, and suddenly they feel just like knocked out. And some of them have had the experience of being knocked out so often when they receive feedback from their teacher that they just that's why they're refusing to look at it. So why would students interpret helpful feedback as proof of failure? Well, Carol Dweck suggests that there are two different views of intelligence. On one hand, you can see intelligence as a God-given or genetically bestowed fixed trait. It just is or it isn't, right? You either have it or you don't. If you think of intelligence as this fixed trait, then feedback would be evidence that though some people are smart, you're not. And effort would mean that you aren't very good, and asking questions would be really risky because then everyone would find out that you're not any good and you're not smart. And the challenges aren't an opportunity to stretch and grow, they're opportunities to fail. This is what Carol Dweck would call having a fixed mindset. On the other hand, you could believe that intelligence is a skill that's developed through effort over time. And then feedback is helpful. Effort, it means that you're getting better. Asking questions is strategic, and challenges present opportunities to grow and learn. Now, as teachers, we really, really want our students to be thinking that the feedback we give them is going to help them, that they should put in the effort and dig deep and persist, and see that as proof that they're getting better. We want them to ask questions, we want them to seek help, and we want them to rise to challenges. So as educators, it's very important that we cultivate a growth mindset culture in the classroom, because that's what Carol Dweck refers to this as, a growth mindset. So I want you to watch this growth mindset video. Here is the link. You can get it excuse me. You can get it from the PowerPoint, which I'll upload separately. Or you can just type into YouTube, Carol Dweck TED Talk, The Power of Yet. And that will give you, either way we'll do it. So click the link, watch the video, and then come back. And once you've watched that video, what I want you to answer are these questions. What's a growth mindset? How does it differ from a fixed mindset? And why does the growth mindset matter for teachers? And I really want you to watch that video and think about it, hear it from Carol Dweck's own mouth, and the kinds of outcomes that we see from the growth mindset. I want you to think through those questions, and then I want you to answer these questions that are embedded into this PowerPoint as your assignment for our class today.